Section 2 is Carissa Explains It All.
Yep.
And we have our Keynote Run iPhone.
Yes.
Or iPhone Run Keynote. This stuff really just talks to each other very cleanly.
If we were using my phone,
yeah,
I could control it on my watch.
Why aren't we using your phone?
Because my phone's not keyed into your computer.
You just connect to the Wi-Fi and just give it a code. You just got to install the app.
This is the first time you've told me this.
You just install the app. It's very easy.
I've been doing this for how many weeks now? And this is the first time you told me.
I know, but I guess it kind of kills the whole thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't have to email it to you if that was the case.
Yeah, and we have some channel announcements in the announcements section.
Okay.
So here we are, how to make an album. If you're new or if you just came across this, we do a full episode. And I put a card in the beginning of these so you can just go over to the full episode. We do a lot of different stuff, but this is a broad overview on how to make an album, right?
Yes, very broad.
And, I throw these keynotes together right before the show. You put them together on your phone and send them to me. And I have to say, this week was a little half-assed.
It was not half-assed.
Well, leave a comment. You tell me if the keynote could have been better on this one.
It left room for discussion.
Left room for discussion. Okay.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of this is very subjective.
No, it's not.
It is. It depends on what kind of music you're doing. It depends on what equipment you have. And it depends on what your circumstances are. So yeah, it's fairly subjective.
The process of making an album, no matter what equipment or circumstances used, is always the same.
Right. And I cover that.
You do.
But it's a little sparse on the details because it's so subjective.
Right.
Okay?
Also,
so no, this is not half-assed. This is me anticipating you going off on a mansplaining rant.
Fair enough. Also, next week, we're going to talk to Bob Olson, who was a staff engineer at Motown.
Yes.
So make sure you hit subscribe for that if you're watching this from the clip. All right, okay. So how do we make an album?
How do we make an album? Okay.
Please explain to me how to make an album.
Okay, so how fans see the process. Let's fix this so I can actually see this. There we go.
The cats just totally had like an epic brawl in here, and I just ignored it. Studio cat lost. Regal cat sitting right there. We totally are putting a cat cam up next week.
It's 9:40. Of course, it's epic brawl time.
Hey! Get your claws out of that. Hey. I'm going to start flinging download cards at you. Knock it off. There we go.
Okay, so how fans see the album making process. Number 1, band stops touring to write and record. Number 2, a long time passes.
How long?
It really depends.
Okay.
It just seems like a freaking long time sometimes. Because some bands will be off the road for like 2 years trying to put an album together. Unless, you're Axl Rose, in which case it's more like 10.
Hey, all the weight I lost found him.
Oh, I think it found him before you lost it.
Yeah, we kind of ballooned up together, didn't we?
A little bit.
All right.
And the number 3, the album is released. Like magic.
It is kind of a magical process.
It's kind of magical when you're not in the middle of it.
It's true. And what was the longest you ever waited for an album to come out in this before you knew this? No dead air.
4 years?
4 years you waited. So an album was announced. You were aware of the announcement. You got excited for the announcement. Mm-hmm. And then you waited 4 years for the album to come out.
Yep.
Was it any good?
Yes.
What was it?
It was Weezer.
Yeah, all right. So that's not really how it works, though.
No, that's not how it works.
It's not magic. It's a whole series of steps.
Yes, but that's just how the fans see it, because they're not privy to the whole long, involved process of it.
Well, that's what's great about what we do, right? Because we document basically everything.
Yes.
It's pretty obvious what the process is when you look at our result.
Kind of, sort of. I mean, we don't have a camera up here with me recording you doing Freeform Fridays.
We don't have a camera pointed at the camera guy either.
So, I mean, we're not
Steven,
completely documenting.
Greg.
We're not completely documenting everything, but...
Yeah, but we're going to do more videos about it, right?
Yeah.
That's part of what's going to come up in the announcements. All right.
Yeah, I was going to say, nobody actually wants to see us behind the scenes doing the stuff because, Steven's running around with like a chicken with his head cut off trying to make sure the cameras are all operating. And...
No, that's me. No, Steven doesn't operate that way.
Oh,
that's
really?
the way I operate.
Okay.
Steven checks between takes.
Okay. And then I'm up here, half the time I'm standing watching the tape counter.
Yeah.
And the other half I'm sitting and, actively trying not to flip you off. among other things.
When Paul's here, we're going to need the keyboard stand anyway, so we're going to have to move that machine to a lower point.
Okay. Well, we have a table.
Which, hashtag TaskCam688.
Yes. Hashtag TaskCam688.
It's the last great cassette multitrack. And
I
Studio
understand
Cat's
why.
back. Studio Cat is back. We really need to start videotaping these cats in here. There's this epic, it's like a episode of Game of Thrones in here. There's epic power struggles going on.
And it's only 2 cats. Okay.
Yeah.
So...
Bye, Studio Cat.
How fans see the process.
Yeah, how does it actually happen?
How it actually happens. Not quite so simple, I'm afraid. Step 1. Songs are written.
That's not true. It's not true.
I'm starting with the point at which they start writing the songs.
I'm starting at the point at which they sign the contract to write the songs.
Not everybody signs a contract. If they're an independent artist, they don't sign a contract.
Fair enough, but I don't see anything about a contract either before or after songs are written. You're not going to be recording any time before that contract is signed.
But that's only if you're with a label. If you're not with a label, you never had a contract for any of the stuff you've done on your own.
Yeah, that's true.
So I'm not talking about the whole getting a contract part. I'm talking about recording the album.
Fair enough.
So.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Though the reason the contract's important is because that's when the band announces. They sign a contract and then they go public and they say, yes, we signed this contract to make this album, which is where the process begins for you.
No,
Fair
not
enough.
always. Some people sign the contract and then the album never gets made.
That's very true. That's called shelving.
Yes.
And, for example, on Get Off My Lawn, I have the right to shelve anything, right?
Sure.
I try not to. Right? I've lost some things due to technical limitations and things, but I try to just put it all out.
Right.
But, yeah, no, I've totally... Get Off My Lawn started with a band, which we're not going to name because we don't need to. But
I don't even remember their name, to be honest with you.
I do.
Well, good for you.
And they were so miserable to work with.
Yeah.
And it was just like, all right, I'm not working on this album anymore. End of story. No, you cannot have your audio.
Nope. Check your contract. You don't own your audio.
Right. No, I will not sell you my audio for like $300. You know, like
300. Is that what
I
they
think
offered?
that's what they offered me was $300.
Wow. Yeah. No.
No. No, the way it works with Get Off My Lawn is they own the song. It's theirs. They're not allowed to re-record it for 5 years. Give me 5 years to try to sell copies of it, right? And then that's it, right? So then if they're unhappy with our deal, which we totally have a video on this channel called Sustainable Music. We talk about what the contract is public. If they're unhappy with that contract, after 5 years, they can make the exact same album in a different studio on their own dime or on a different label's dime, and there's not a thing I can do about it. I want to give them as much freedom with their material as I possibly can.
Sure.
But yeah, I'm talking in terms of anything that you've heard of. The problem is that with the exception of some large YouTubers, hi Studio Cat, just about everything you can name in terms of the history of recording music was attached to a music label at some point.
Sure.
Very
but we're
little.
We're not starting with how to be famous. We're starting with how do you make the album.
It's true.
Okay.
But you should, even if you're writing them yourself, if you're working with others, you should have a contract in place.
Yes.
All
always.
Right. So the songs get written.
The songs get written.
And then it's recorded.
Yes.
Is that entirely true?
Sometimes the songs are being written while it's being recorded.
Okay, yes.
Sometimes the songs are fully orchestrated before it gets recorded.
Yes.
Sometimes they're half written.
Sometimes they're rewritten.
Sometimes they're rewritten. There's
Paul Simon said that the song it's not in the writing of the song, it's in the rewriting of the song. Yeah, these cats are everywhere this week. We really need a cat cam.
Yes.
Do I have another camera I can throw?
We need to not have you being distracted by the cats.
Yeah,
too.
okay.
So the writing process varies from artist to artist, basically.
Right.
And sometimes the artist doesn't even write the songs. Sometimes somebody else writes the songs and the artist goes in and listens to demos and go, "Oh, I want to do this one." And then they record that one.
Yeah, that's especially in the modern pop music realm. Mm-hmm. That's extremely common.
Yes.
And what happens is that ultimately the reason you get so many... There's a lot of criticism about how many songwriters it takes to write Ooh Baby Baby. Right? But the way the business works is they're all just sharing publishing, so they have to be listed as co-writers. One guy in the room came up with Ooh Baby Baby. They all went, oh yeah, okay, that works. Mm-hmm. And now they're all songwriters.
Right.
So... All right, so the recording process.
Now,
please describe the recording process.
Again, this varies from artist to artist and producer. And yeah, it can be as simple as a guy in a bedroom over a weekend, or it can be as complex as 6 months in a fancy schmancy recording studio that you're paying ridiculous amounts of money per day for.
Thousands of dollars.
Yes.
Thousands upon thousands of dollars.
Yep.
And I'm sitting here watching my levels. I'm a little quiet this week. I'll have to boost it in post. What? No? Okay. Really, we are setting up a cat cam.
It's that time of night.
Yeah, that's true. So the recording, ultimately they're capturing the sound. There's a bunch of different ways to do it. We'll do some video at some point covering the different ways of doing it. Mm-hmm. Next week when we talk to Bob Olson's, for example, there's a lot of talk about punch-in. And friend of the show, Jared, he was like, what is punch-in? So just to quickly describe it, punching in is when you're playing a pre-recorded thing over a tape. Mm-hmm. You start recording while it plays. So then you play the thing that you're trying to fix, and then you stop recording and it goes back to the thing that was playing before. That's a punch-in.
Yes.
Well, it doesn't always have to go. It could just stop, right?
Right.
But it's when you start playing, then you hit the record button. So you're listening to yourself, and now you're putting in this phrase.
Yes.
And so that's what punching in is. That is almost a lost art at this point. People don't punch in anymore. I remember doing a lot of... I did a album in college where it was a girl with a backing track. Mm-hmm. And I forget her name. She was a friend of Tim's.
Okay, I don't remember this one, but okay.
Yeah, it was an afternoon.
Oh, okay.
And basically we just punched it in. We just made it phrase by phrase, and there we go. And she was looking at me like, can't we just record this a bunch of times and then you edit it? And I'm like, this is faster. Punching in is faster than
Sure.
trying to comp the edits.
Sure.
But you got to start somewhere. All right. So recording is when we capture everything, right?
Yes.
Now I believe what you're describing is we capture a multi-track.
In most cases, yes. It can be. I guess it could be a single track, but most records nowadays are multi-track, aren't they?
Most everything's produced well, let's move on to 3.
Yeah.
And the reason I point this out is because mixing is really only a thing with multi-track.
Yeah.
Right? You're not going to mix a stereo recording. That's mastering. Mixing is the process of taking the individual recordings of each microphone, blending them together into a single stereo track, and mastering is then the process of bringing that level up to where it's generally as loud as other things and generally as bright as other things, and maybe a little less so because the loudness war has made things nuts, but...
And then transferring it to the master.
Right, transferring it to the master and preparing it for mass production.
Yes.
So, did I leave anything out on mixing?
No.
We're going to do a mix tutorial. We're actually going to do 2 mix tutorials.
Yes, because mixing is very complicated and really depends on the genre of music.
No, it does not.
To a degree, it does.
It does not.
You're not going to mix electronic music the same way you mix folk music.
You absolutely mix electronic music.
You would.
You mix folk music.
You would. I'm just saying.
You take the individual elements and you blend them to taste.
Yeah, you blend them to taste, but you're not using necessarily like the same compressors or the same limiters or the same equipment during the process.
You can totally use the same equipment on either of them.
I'm just saying you're not necessarily doing it the exact same way for those 2 genres of music.
By that standard, you're not necessarily doing it the exact same way for 2 different songs on the same album. It's a very individual process.
Yes. That's what I'm saying.
Which is full of overcomplications.
Yes. And that's why Dawn's going to be doing multiple mixed tutorials.
I'm doing 2. I'm doing exactly 2. I'm doing
more than 1. It's 2.
I'm doing an analog mix tutorial and I'm doing a digital mix tutorial.
Okay.
And so if you think about it, we're going to cover the difference between how those work.
Yes.
The workflows are very, very different.
Yes.
And one is going to be way longer than the other. All right, so mastering is when you mix in a room. So imagine this room doesn't sound good. And you mix in your room, let's say your bedroom. Mastering is when you then send it to a guy who has the ability to listen to it in such a way where he will understand what it will sound like on every system in the world.
Yes.
That's what mastering is you're going, okay, because it might be played through a mono television over, UHF or something. It might be played over vinyl in a very high fidelity situation. It might be played over an MP3 while somebody's jogging. Cars are going to sound different. Clock radios sound different.
Yep.
iPhone speakers, very common listening. It's good to do an iPhone check. But mastering has become the last refuge for the audio professional,
Yes.
I think. And I'm not sure. I think part of it is just because from a budgetary standpoint, it's arguably the least expensive because it's the least time intensive. It doesn't take that long. I didn't ask Bob on next week's show, but in a previous conversation he had told me he estimates an album to take about 2 days. And I've said it on the podcast before. It took me about a day to do an album.
Right.
I like Bob's take on it. If I ever take on commercial projects, I'll go back. I'll actually do a 2-day process. But mastering is very, very quick. Like Eric Serafin talks about, he's like, it's just a little EQ here and there, a little compressor. Why are you paying all this money for it? The real work's done in the mix. But mastering is also arguably the technical side of it. You got to do your PQ edits. You got to do your CD text. All that stuff's done in mastering. What am I forgetting? You send me a thing. It's just 4 things. Now you're letting me mansplain. So let's look at 5. Unless you have thoughts on 3 and 4.
Nope, I figured you'd cover those just fine.
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed, but that's your board.
That is my board.
I got a lovely picture of your board.
You came in here and took that one yourself?
Uh-huh. That was all me.
Did you use the T5 or did you use your iPhone?
iPhone?
Try the T5. The T5's a lot of fun.
I was putting this together on my iPhone, so I took it from my iPhone just to make it easier for me.
Hey, fair enough. All right.
All right.
So number 5 is pressing, duplication, replication.
Yes.
I'm going to let you try to explain it, and then I'll jump in if it's...
Okay. So replication usually applies to optical media like CDs and DVDs where you're not burning the disc, where you're actually starting with a glass master and making a nickel stamper from it and then making the CDs or the DVDs from that. That's replication. Duplication is burning.
Yes.
Basically.
Duplication is burning a disc.
Yes.
Yep. And
then pressing applies more to vinyl.
Pressing is vinyl.
Yes.
Duplication also can refer to analog cassettes.
Yes.
Because you duplicate cassettes.
Right.
Replication, you're about right. It's because you do the stamp into the silicon disc. Mm-hmm. So you use a glass master to make the stamper. Mm-hmm. You stamp it into the silicon disc, and then you spray a reflective coating over that. So when there's I believe it's a 1, it will, or no, I'm sorry. The 1 is when it has an indentation in the groove, and that will disperse the laser when it hits it. And 0s are flat. So the duplication just etches a reflective surface.
Right.
And so it performs the same function. The laser doesn't get a clean laser back that it's expecting, so it understands that it's 1. Mm-hmm. And that happens 44,000 times per second.
Yes.
And that's pretty wild. Yeah, those are large. Those tend to be large facilities. That's an interesting note. There's a studio that I'm now totally envious of. Yeah. If somebody calls me and goes, "Hey, I want to record with you," I'm going to tell them, "Go call Welcome to 1979." It's a studio out in Nashville. They do analog recording. Mm-hmm. They have a lathe on site. Nice. On site, and they have an on-site plating and a stamp, and I believe that they have the press in there too, so they can record to tape, make the acetate, make the stamper, press the vinyl right there. What they're doing is they also do direct to disc.
Okay.
Which sounds like this sounds right up my alley, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Direct-to-disc recording is when they skip recording to tape and they run a needle over an acetate to make a vinyl stamper from right there. Wow. That's how records used to get made. We talk about it with the Bob Olson interview. Yeah. That's coming up next week. So marketing. You get the word out.
You get the word out.
Out.
If you've got lots and lots of money, you take out magazine ads and billboards. If you don't, you hit up everybody you know on every social media site ever.
And then nobody shares it. And it drives you crazy. Please, if you see something especially the projects, especially the Jazz Destroyers, tell a friend about the Jazz Destroyers. Mm-hmm. Tell a friend about this. We're all doing our best. This is really...
If you come across one of the tunes that you really dig because it's got a good groove and you really like it, share it.
Share it. You want to use it in the background of your video? Let me know, and no hate speech. That's my only 2 things. Just let me know you're doing it and no hate speech. And then finally, distribution and release. Marketing and distribution and release kind of happen about the same time.
Yeah, that's why it's all kind of on the same slide.
Distribution is when you take the thousands upon thousands of copies you made
Mm-hmm.
and you distribute them out to the individual stores. The problem is there are no more stores. I mean, there are,
Well,
but
there's
there
stores, but also, distribution can be,
aren't. Making
Putting
it
it up
available on iTunes.
yeah, iTunes or Bandcamp or
Right,
wherever else. I don't even know anymore. There's so many.
right. And releases the day you make it all available for sale.
Yes.
So, yep. Yeah, that's pretty much how you make a record. We're oversimplifying. There's a whole step in the process of writing the material, between writing the material and recording, where the A&R gets involved. Because a band doesn't...
That's assuming there's a label. That's assuming you're not an independent artist releasing it yourself.
Well, even as an
you're-
independent artist, most artists aren't going to record 10 songs and release 10 songs. They're going to record like 15 songs and release 10.
Sure.
So,
In that case, they're acting as their own A&R, but
Yeah.
that's part of the recording process. That's part of the...
well, and they're acting as their own A&R by selecting the songs that they'll play.
Sure.
Yep. Cool. All right. What's next? Section 3.
Section 3.